measure or a string with knots or beads every foot apart. You lay it on a diagonal. Probably want to do it 10 feet just because it works out to be convenient. And so you lay it over there, and then what you do is you're going to measure. You're always going to use either the top or the bottom of the tape measure. Every foot, you're going to look for residue. If you have residue at that mark, in this case on the surface, on the top of this thing, you count that as a 1. If there's no residue, you count that as a 0, and you add those up. You can count manure, do not count rocks. Okay, that's cheating. All right, multiply that after 10 feet, multiply that by 10, gives you % covered. Do it on the diagonal, do it in several fields. Thank you. Different sections of your field, it gives you a good estimate of the residue. So if we're talking about, so this is my soil surface out here. So when you're talking about residue, one thing you want to promote when you're talking about residue management is to have residue. So this is going to be my, and it could be, this could be a corn stalk, it could be whatever. It could be bunches of straw. You want to have residue that it's partially buried. You don't really want to, you want to try to avoid as much. It is going to happen, but you want to minimize to some degree the amount of residue that it gets completely buried. The reason being for that is that when you have a rainfall event, water's coming down, right? So he's going to hit the ground. When he hits these areas where you have the residue breaking the surface of the soil, this residue is actually going to work kind of like a wick. So it's going to actually help water go into the profile and continue going down. And it's going to help then recharge your soil profile. Remember I talked about the amount of water needed. It's going to help you recharge that soil profile for your crops. It's going to give you that plant available water. In this scenario, usually what happens is that you have the rainfall, right? Water starts to infiltrate. You don't have that wicking action. You're not protecting the soil surface either with residue on the surface. So you can have some crusting for one thing. That's going to impede infiltration. That's going to slow down infiltration. But as water goes into the profile and hits this residue material, this residue actually is going to act, it's going to create a barrier for that water to infiltrate into the soil. So think about this being in the ground. There's actually going to be a little pocket in there. So water's going to go in, and there's this big gap in there, this big hole in there. So what's going to happen is that before water actually goes into that hole, it's either going to bypass around, have to bypass around, so it's a longer path for it to go in, or for it to go inside in here and go through, this zone of the soil around that material has to saturate. Water in the soil is held under tension, under a suction. So you can say water in the soil sucks, right? No? All right, so it's held under a suction, but the pressure inside that when you have any cavity is actually 0. It's close to atmospheric, which is actually a higher pressure. So you need to break that pressure differential. It's just energy type stuff. So that's why then this water needs to pond, it needs to saturate for it to then go to that 0 atmospheric pressure and then go into that cavity. So what's happening is that this zone then is going to tend to saturate, and then you're going to have runoff production and erosion risk a lot sooner. So not only that you're having the erosion risk, but your water, you're going to be losing water to runoff where you want that water in your profile. You want it where it's doing good to you, to your system. Okay? That's what they're designed to do. And I like to say there's not a universal solution when we're talking about there's no free lunch, and there's no universal solution when we talk about tillage. A lot of factors go into deciding what would be the best tillage for your operation, or if you want to go to no-till. Soil type, your slope, cropping systems that you have, what crops are you growing, what rotations you're using. Obviously, you know, what equipment you have available. And lastly but not least, what's your preference too? I mean, there's some of human factor in there that you have to be comfortable with what you're doing, obviously, right? Much longer than the width of this pit, right? So my theory is that as they were going along, remember, kind of compacted soil, you know, hardened up, wet, you're going over, and then you hit an area that we excavated, softer, we have sand, we use a plate compactor, but at the last layer, so it didn't really get, you know, this is kind of an art, we're kind of learning how to do some of this stuff. So a little bit softer conditions. So my theory is that as the equipment was going over, it just floated over the pit. So we didn't really get that work that we wanted to see on the layering that we did. However, I did go and measure the depth out in the soil out there, out in the pit itself, and they went down about 3.5 inches. So all three of them. So exactly what they're designed to do, even under this not less than optimal conditions, right? This one, if you look at it, it's a little bit more set up to do a little bit more incorporation of residues. Main thing doing that is actually the offset angle of those filters out there, right? So that's what's getting you more of that. On this one, the filters are actually more at a zero offset, and so they're not doing as much disturbance. It depends what are you trying to do. If we look at over here, you can see here, this might be just a fluke, but looks like there was a little bit of that vertical action. Exactly what they're designed to do, right? Same thing with the with this other